Last week, I introduced our Advent theme, Christ is Coming, Look to the East. I mentioned that Ukrainian Catholics had begun Advent on November 15th, but they don't call it Advent like Latin Rite Catholics do. For our Eastern Catholic brothers and sisters, Advent is called the Nativity Fast or Philip's Fast, since it begins on the feast of St. Philip. As the name implies, fasting is an important aspect of their preparation for Christmas. For Eastern Catholics, the faith involves not just the mind and spirit, but also, and to a great extent, the body and the senses. Through fasting, we become more aware of our own weaknesses and our inability to save ourselves, more conscious of our dependence on God. For Byzantine Catholics, there is no feast without the fast. The Nativity Fast encompasses 40 days, and its purpose is to open the door of our souls to welcome God more fully into our lives at Christmas. Customs vary from place to place, but traditionally it calls for strict abstinence on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and a lesser abstinence on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This means no meat, fish, wine, oil, dairy, or other animal products on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Wine and oil are allowed on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and fish, but no other animal products, are allowed on Saturdays and Sundays. Many Eastern Catholics eat only one meal per day during this period. They don't eat between meals, and they fast more strictly from December 13th to the 24th. Now, this fast is not always strictly kept today, since our Western society begins its Christmas celebrations so early and fills them with such excess. But this is still the ideal, and if you look, it's not hard to find fast-appropriate recipes and advice online. These Eastern Rite practices probably sound excessive to our Western Latin Rite minds, because for us, fasting has been de-emphasized since Vatican II. But in light of the current world situation, it actually makes sense this year. Last year, Ukraine produced 33 tons of wheat, exporting 20 tons. It's also the largest producer of sunflower seeds and oil in the world. The war is leading to a serious food crisis from the Asian Pacific to Eastern African countries like Ethiopia, Somalia, and South Sudan. Fasting from food and making other sacrifices, such as fasting from social media or our favorite forms of entertainment this Advent, could help us to feel closer to Ukrainians and others around the world who are suffering due to the impact of this war and the ongoing effects of the pandemic. Archbishop Boris Gudziak, the leader of Ukrainian Catholics in the United States, has asserted that the Ukrainian people's long history of suffering and deprivation has formed them to be the courageous and resilient people we see today. The Archbishop's testimony goes right to the heart. He often speaks about the Holodomor, a man-made famine during the Soviet period that killed millions of Ukrainians. This famine was set in motion in 1929 by Stalin's efforts to collectivize agriculture in the major grain-producing areas of the Soviet Union. Under his leadership, the Communist Party sought to force peasants to relinquish their land and personal property to large collective farms that would profit the regime. When Ukrainian farmers resisted this, whole towns in Ukraine were blocked from receiving food aid, while at the same time they were required to hand over all of their crops to the government. It got so bad that communist officials went from village to village, ransacking the homes of peasants, taking everything edible, including their pets. It is thought that at least 4 million Ukrainians perished during this period. Today, there are Holodomor memorials in many cities and towns in Ukraine, as well as several other countries. I recently discovered such a memorial just a few blocks from Union Station in Washington, D.C. I don't want to dwell too long on this tragic history, but I would like to emphasize that there is a place for some form of fasting in our Advent practices this year more than ever, and that in this season of abundance, we should never forget that many people around the world lack even the most basic necessities of life. We'll close once again with our prayer to Mary, the protection of the Ukrainian people. We fly to your protection, O Virgin, Mother of God. Despise not our prayers in our needs, but deliver us from all dangers, since you alone are pure and blessed. O most glorious, ever Virgin Mary, the Mother of Christ our God, accept our prayers and present them to your Son and our God, that for the sake of you, he enlighten and save our souls. Amen.